If this is not my most requested video of all time, I don't know what this is. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Oh wait, I need to switch shirts. Oh no, I'm wearing the same shirt as the other video. I'll be back. Hello book reading friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Mel, and today I bring you the ultimate Sarah J Maas reading guide. Sarah J Maas reading guide for beginners. I am going to talk all about Miss Sarah J Maas and all of her books, her 3 main title series, how to read them, what to do, some tips, what they're all about, what you should expect from all of them, etc, etc. I am here to break this all down for you and hopefully help you if you are looking to get into Miss Maas and her work. Now this is probably my most requested video. Every single time I go on live streams, you guys always ask me, where do I start with SJM? What are her books about? What should I expect? If I like this, then which way do I go into? If I don't like this, then should I avoid that? So hopefully, again, this video will be somewhat educational with Sarah J Maas and her work, and you can narrow down the books that you'd like to read. Now, as you can see from the shelves behind me, I do own every Sarah J Maas book. Sarah J Maas is one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite author. I just love the way that she writes characters, and I love the way that she writes her plots, and I'll go a little bit more in depth as I go along in the video, but as you guys know, I hold a lot of love for these works. The ACOTAR Thorns and Roses series is my favorite series, alongside the Throne of Glass series. But if you have already read Sarah J Maas, let me know down below what are your favorite books by SJM, or if you have read them in any particular order, what order did you read it in? Were there any books you skipped? Any books that you didn't necessarily like or love? Let me know all of that down below so that maybe that could be helpful for other people looking to get into this as well. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So a little backstory as to how I found out about Sarah J Maas and her work and why I ended up loving it so much. I will never forget this. I was in my senior year of high school and I was just looking for a good fantasy book, and one of my best friends actually said, Mel, I found these books. I think you're gonna love them. I think you need to read them. And I was like, okay, well, if she says I'll like them, then she knows me better than a lot of people, so let me just get into it. And that was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. I literally remember so vividly going into this, eating this book up in one sitting, loving Tamlin as you know, old me had a lot to go through. And I remember loving the story and Feyre and where it was going. I remember just falling in love with Rhys the first time that I saw him. And unknowingly to me, that same year, book 3 came out. So I read them, I think, right after book 3 came out. So I binged all 3 books back to back, and it became my favorite series of all time. I had never really read a book that focused on the Fae, but rather the Fae were always kind of like a subplot, like kind of another lineage of characters that were in there but weren't necessarily the focus. I thought the twists and turns were fantastic. And obviously the biggest thing with Sarah J Maas and her books, not only with A Court of Thorns and Roses, but the rest of her books, is that mental health is always a big part of her stories, and that is something that I really enjoy. I think when it comes to fantasy, the topics of mental health are often just lost in translation, if not there at all. And so I love that they are always a prominent part of her story, whether it's depression or trauma or PTSD or overcoming self-sabotage and self-hatred. There is a lot of things in here that are quite heavy to read, but that are also quite pleasant to read about because the representation with mental health is fantastic. Now, that being said, her series are not the series to go to if you are looking for diversity. And in fact, I think you should be looking towards BIPOC authors if you are looking for diversity. Go to the source itself. There are certain Black characters and there are certain characters that are LGBTQIA+. Very, very slight, but again, not the place to go if you are looking for that. Now, that being said, every Sarah J Maas series is entirely different, and so I always like to kind of set them apart in little pitches and say, if you are primarily this type of reader, you should be reading this series, but if you are looking for this, you should be reading that series, because they're all vastly different. They range from young adult to new adult to adults, and also they all have different focuses, whether that's being character driven, whether that's a mystery, or whether that's plot and world building and a lot of conflict. And the first book that she published traditionally was Throne of Glass by obviously Sarah J Maas. I don't know why I had to say the author. Now, she wrote this when she was 16 years old, and you can definitely see improvement in writing as the books start progressing. I don't think Throne of Glass is the strongest book in the series. In fact, I personally think the first installment is the weakest. And so I personally think if you don't enjoy Throne of Glass, just give the second book a shot, because I guarantee you with writing, it gets better. Now, for a synopsis, in this series, we follow Celaena Sardothian, who is an assassin, and she is summoned to the king's castle to potentially become the king's champion. Now, the only thing that she has to do, and I say only very slightly, is defeat other 23 killers, assassins, thieves, knights, warriors, everything in between. She has to defeat those 23 people in order to acquire her freedom, which is not necessarily freedom because she'll still work for the king. However, there are a lot of elements thrown into this that Celaena never anticipated, like magic and mysterious deaths, and a blossoming romance that could potentially happen with either the captain of the guard or the crown prince himself. And that is where the story starts progressing. Now, this is set to be a Cinderella retelling. If Cinderella were an assassin and not a princess and a deadly warrior, I guess I could kind of see where the Cinderella retelling comes in. However, take that very, very lightly, because if you don't know that this is a Cinderella retelling, you would never know, and even if you did, you probably wouldn't be able to catch it. However, in the Throne of Glass series, I think the things that stand out the most are definitely the world building, the plot, and the conflict. Romance in this one is definitely a subplot in the story, and honestly, all of SJM's stories have romance, and all of them have happy endings. She is not known to have kind of sad, tragic endings. That is not the type of author that she is. In this one, plot, world building, and conflict are definitely the things that shine the most. Hence why all of the later books are so long, just because there is so much to unpack, there is so much conflict to settle, there are so many traumas and so many just hardships to overcome, and those journeys are not easy, and that's why the books start getting denser and denser. But I think in regards to pacing and in regards to resolution, Throne of Glass is probably the strongest series, and that's why this series shines the most in that regard. And I think it's all due to the fact that the series is so long and the characters have gone through so much suffering, so much death, so much pain, that at the very end, everything that happens is earned. The characters in this one are very complex. People who you think have good motivations end up having bad motivations, and the people who seem to have bad motivations have good motivations. The good ones can't stay good and the bad ones can't stay bad, and it's all around just twists and turns that you don't expect. And I think that's what's so great about Throne of Glass. If you're into the plot, into the war, into the conflict, into the world building, this is the one for you. Now, that being said, the series is obviously long and it takes up most of the shelf, but this is the entire series for Throne of Glass. We have first the novella, which is The Assassin's Blade, and if you're a traditionalist, I would recommend that you read this first, especially because after you move on from Crown of Midnight, which ends on the biggest cliffhanger that you could ever imagine, you won't want to go back. Then we obviously have Throne of Glass, you have Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, and the three chunkers who coincidentally are also my top 3 from the series. You have Empire of Storms, you have Tower of Dawn, and then finally, the longest book that I have ever read, Kingdom of Ash, which is at a whopping almost 1,000 pages. Now, with Throne of Glass, it's also very important to note that between Empire of Storms and Kingdom of Ash is Tower of Dawn. Tower of Dawn is another novella. This one follows Chaol, who is the captain of the guard that we meet in book 1, and this is his arc, his character story, so this is very much focused on him. This book happens at the same time that Empire of Storms is happening, and somewhere in between they overlap, and then this finishes, I believe, after Empire of Storms. I will put up a chart on screen if you want to look at it. Some people read these 2 books at the same time. Don't know if I would recommend that because they are chunkers, they are quite long, there is a lot of information in here. But don't skip Tower of Dawn. Don't you dare skip over one of the best books in the series. And the next series that I'm going to be talking about is the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. And as I mentioned before, this was the first series that I read by Sarah J Maas, and it quickly became my favorite series of all all time. Now this one, keywords, this is more of a fantasy romance. The romance is the biggest part of this story. It is also very character driven, so if you don't enjoy yourself a plot that is very heavy, if you don't like yourself heavy world building, then this is probably the way to go. Now in this one we follow Feyre, who is a young huntress, and she has been taking care of her family since her mother died and her father lost all of his fortune and his work. And one day she goes into the woods and she sees this wolf that she is willing to slay if only to bring food and money to her family. And soon enough she finds out that this wolf was indeed Fae, and now Tamlin, who is part of the Spring Court, has come to her land, to her house, to claim her life and to bring her back to the Spring Court to claim the life of that Fae that she murdered. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling as well, even though it's very, very slight, and it ends up doing its own thing after book 1. So there is a curse that needs to be broken. Feyre doesn't understand what it is and how it's meant to be broken. That all unfolds during book 1. Now again, if you like a more character driven story with twists and turns, a lot of romance and also a lot of smut, then this one is for you. This was initially branded as YA, but it's really not. It was even branded as new adult, but honestly, this should have just been branded as adult the whole time. I believe at the time that the series starts, Feyre is 19 and it starts progressing. And Feyre's two sisters are also between like 25 and 23, so they're all adults. So again, should have been adults the entire time. And this one, the main trilogy is complete, and the main trilogy is A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the fan favorite and also my favorite. Then we have A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the third book and the last one in the series. And then we have the novella, which is A Court of Frost and Starlight. You don't need to read farther than this because technically this is the main series. It is already wrapped up. You don't need to continue with it. However, there is a new set that is coming out as of 2021. So we have a second part to the series that doesn't follow Feyre. Feyre is still a part of the other trilogy. However, she is not the main character as she is in the main trilogy. So the book following A Court of Frost and Starlight and the conflict that A Court of Frost and Starlight sets up is actually A Court of Silver Flames. And after this, I believe we are getting 2 more books and either 1 or 2 more novellas. It is still kind of unsure. And so in this one, we follow Feyre's sister, Nesta, in her journey after the main trilogy and after she finds herself in a very unexpected position, a very unexpected life with a lot of trauma and PTSD that she needs to surpass in order to heal and see where she goes as a character. So that is what the A Court of Thorns and Roses series is about. I think in regards to easiness to read, probably A Court of Thorns and Roses is easier to read than Throne of Glass. I think Throne of Glass is a lot more dense with the world building, and there is a lot of things that I often find myself confused about that I had to go back and reread. So in regards to easygoing reading, I think A Court of Thorns and Roses is probably a little bit easier to read because the world building is very simple. And again, it's more so about the characters rather than anything else. Just know the first book is also not the best one. I think you just need to get past that hurdle and get past book 1 in order for it to get really good. But just know that like Throne of Glass, that includes the theme of depression and trauma. In ACOTAR, it's probably a lot darker, I guess you could say. I think especially in A Court of Silver Flames, there is mentions of sexual abuse, of domestic abuse, there is mention of mutilation and graphic violence, there is also depression and trauma and PTSD, substance abuse. So I think in regards to content warnings, probably ACOTAR is a little bit heavier in that sense, but I think it's still easier to read because of, again, the world building aspect rather than Throne of Glass. And the final series that is yet to be talked about is the Crescent City series. This so far only has 1 book out, which is House of Earth and Blood, most commonly known as Crescent City. And I think it'll forever be Crescent City in my head because Crescent City is in big bold letters down here, and then the title is tiny here. And this pitch, if I were to give you, like, if you like this, then go for this. If you like yourself a good murder mystery with angels and demons and just a lot of, again, twists and turns, I'd say go for Crescent City. However, we don't know when we're getting book 2. We hope that it's gonna be 2022 at this point, but there is only one book out. Now in Crescent City, we follow Bryce Quinlan, who is half fae, half human, and she finds herself in the midst of a murder investigation, a murder that rocked her entire life, something that she was not expecting, something that has left her with a lot of grief. And now they are tasking her with trying to figure out exactly why this murder mystery has happened, and they pair her with Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel, a person who could potentially help her find all of the answers that they are seeking, except that more crazy stuff starts going down in Crescent City and time is running out and they need to figure out what is going on. Now, as I stated before, the theme of grief is very big in this book. Depression and grief and overcoming that is the main thing about this book. However, I love that this book is centered more so with the conversation of friendship and loyalty, which is something that, yes, we see in other books, but that is the main premise of Crescent City. The friendship is what shines the most in here, and although there is a budding romance between Bryce and Hunt as you move along in the story, it's truly the friendship that starts gnawing at your heartstrings and that makes you want to bawl your eyes out. Just prepare the tissues. This is one of the longer books. This is almost, I believe, or a little bit under 800 pages, but it's worth every bit of it. I also have a spoiler-free reading blog for this, so I will leave it linked down below. I also have discussions for all of the ACOTAR books. I will leave those down below as well because I did a read-along for them in preparation of A Court of Silver Flames. I often find myself rereading books and lowering the rating, and in this one I found myself rereading and making the rating higher. I gave this a 4-star when I first read it, and upon a reread it became a 5-star. I think if there's anything that SJM does perfectly, beside everything that I have previously mentioned, is obviously foreshadowing. If you have read any Sarah J Maas books, then you know that nothing comes out of nowhere. She is the master at putting a gun on stage and letting it fire in the middle of the play. She is a master at just leaving you all of the clues right before your eyes, but they are so just like inconspicuous that you would never pick them up unless you were really, really looking. And I think Crescent City does that so well. There are just so many, everything is just right in front of you and you don't realize it up until the very end or when you are rereading the book. As you can see, there are a lot of blue tabs. I would probably say this is Sarah J Maas's most emotional book to date, because again, the whole premise of the book is centered around grief and loss. So just beware of that if you are looking to go into it. That being said though, it's definitely one of my favorite Sarah J Maas books to date. So all in all, what should you start with? What should you stay away from? There is no right or wrong answer. There is no right order to read these books. There isn't like, read them in publication order or read them in this order. It's definitely up to you, up to what you enjoy or what you think appeals to you based on the synopses. It's literally up to the reader. So like I always say, if you like plot, world building, conflict, war, it's Throne of Glass. If you like yourself the topic of friendship and loyalty and a good murder mystery with twists and turns, then go with Crescent City. And if you enjoy yourself a character-driven story with a lot of romance, with very good written smuts, then definitely go for the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So again, there is no right or wrong order. My personal order was A Court of Thorns and Roses, then I read Crescent City, and lastly I went into Throne of Glass. Obviously, I made my way through Throne of Glass last just because it's the lengthier series, so it is quite a commitment. But if you think you'll enjoy Throne of Glass the best and you want to read that first and buy yourself the whole box set, you do you. So again, there is no right or wrong order, but I hope what I have talked about today kind of cleared your mind a little bit and helped you make a decision on where to start. But if you still have any questions, again, you can leave them in the comment section. I am always peeping the comment section and answering to as many comments as I can, if not all of them. I will definitely be in the comment section if you guys still need any help. So yeah, that is all for today, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, it was one of my most requested videos talking about how to read SJM. So hope I cleared your mind a little bit and helped you out. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe down below for more bookish content. If you haven't already, I am constantly uploading videos that I'm sure you do not want to miss, as well as live streaming every single Friday, doing weekly reading sprints. And if you want more exclusive exclusive content, more live streams, more one-on-one access to me, a Discord server, buddy rates, all of the above and even more. Then you can sign up to my Patreon. That is all linked down below. We call ourselves the Citadel, and it's always a fun time over there. And alongside that, you can also find all of my socials linked down below. And if you made it to the end of this video, let's leave a crescent moon down below because of Crescent City. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.